The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and indigo. Silas stood by the river, the gentle rush of water a lonely melody against the vast stillness of his ranch. The air was thick with the scent of earth and dry grass, a reminder of the emptiness that enveloped him since she had left. As he turned, a glimmer caught his eye, a wooden crate bobbing against the riverbank. Curiosity pulled him closer, heart quickening. He knelt, prying it open, and there she was. Dark hair cascading down her shoulders, eyes wide with fear, yet sparkling with something he couldn't name. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice barely breaking the silence. She leaned in, breath warm against the chill of dusk. "Elowen," she murmured, lips curving into a shy smile. "Your wife." His heart stuttered, the weight of the past and future colliding in that single word. Elowen sat on the wood floor of the crate, the sun filtering through the slats above. Dust motes danced in the light, floating lazily like memories uninvited. She hugged her knees, the rough wood pressing into her skin. The smell of the river nearby mixed with the dampness of the late afternoon air, a fragrant reminder that freedom was just a whisper away, yet she was trapped in this makeshift cage. Her heart raced as she thought of the choice her brother made, the betrayal sinking into her bones. She had trusted him, had believed they could survive together, but survival had morphed into something darker, something twisted. The memory of her brother's voice haunted her, cold and calculating. "You'll fetch a good price," he'd said, shoving her into the crate with the same indifference he showed to a dying animal. She felt small and fragile, a delicate piece of glass in a world full of reckless hands. As she closed her eyes, trying to block out the reality, her mind flickered between the horror of her new fate and the warmth of a home that felt more like a dream than a memory. She longed to be anywhere but here, to reclaim the girl she once was, who danced in fields of wildflowers and laughed freely under a sky unblemished by greed. Silas stood on the riverbank, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the water. His rugged hands rested at his sides, calloused from years of hard labor, yet today they trembled slightly. He had come to this lonely place seeking solace, a reprieve from the memories that dogged his footsteps. The ranch, once filled with laughter and life, now echoed with silence, each corner a reminder of the absence that consumed him. Today, however, something different tugged at the edges of his consciousness, a faint rustling, a sound that broke through his reverie. And then he saw it, a crate, battered and forgotten, half submerged in the mud. Curiosity flickered in his chest, pulling him toward the crate like a moth to flame. He knelt beside it, brushing grime from the slats to peer inside. The sight took his breath away. The girl huddled inside was nothing like he had anticipated. Elowen's wide, terrified eyes met his, and in that instant, a jolt of recognition shot through him. Her vulnerability was a mirror to his own, and as he took her in, the frail frame, the tangled hair, the fear lurking beneath her surface, he felt the weight of questions that would never escape his lips. What brought her to this forsaken place? Why did the world choose to abandon her? The air thickened with unspoken words, and silence wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket. Elowen's thoughts raced. She could sense the man's hesitation, the flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. The warmth of his presence contrasted sharply with the coldness that had enveloped her life, but trust was a fragile thing, and her heart screamed for caution. Her brother's betrayal had carved deep scars, and she couldn't let herself hope. So she held her breath, waiting for him to turn away, to leave her there, unseen and forgotten. "What's your name?" Silas finally managed, his voice low, rough like gravel. Her response was a breath caught in her throat. She had rehearsed her name 1,000 times, the name that had once meant something, that had held laughter and love. But now it felt like a ghost haunting her. With a tremor running through her, the word escaped her lips, but it changed in the air, morphing into something else. "Elowen," she whispered, her body tense. At the sound of her name, Silas felt a pang of something deeper. It resonated within him, awakening a part he thought had died long ago. A flicker of recognition ignited, a fleeting memory of laughter shared, of warmth once present. But just as quickly, the shadows descended again. The world he inhabited was harsh and cruel. It had been stripped of tenderness long ago. He hesitated, then nodded, an acknowledgement of her pain, even as the divide between them widened like a canyon. Ilawan felt the weight of his gaze upon her. She cherished the brief moment of connection, the way he seemed to see her, not as an object or a commodity, but as a person. Yet doubt coiled tightly in her stomach, pushing her to constrict her spirit. Would he become another figure of betrayal? The thought consumed her, filling her with anxiety. She leaned back in the crate, feeling the splintered wood bite into her skin, reminding her of her reality. Trust felt like a luxury she could no longer afford, and in that moment, the emotional distance between them became a chasm, echoing with the silence of unspoken fears. Silas's heart ached with the weight of recognition. She was alive, but so was the ghost of his wife, a presence forever entwined with loss. He could not welcome another into the hollow space that once held her warmth. Yet, looking into Ilawan's eyes, he felt an urge to protect, to bridge the gulf that separated them. But how could he offer a life filled with hope when he himself was drowning in despair? As the river flowed relentlessly by, weaving through the landscape that had seen their sorrows, the two remained bound by a single moment, a tenuous connection overshadowed by their separate pains. Ilawan, encased in the crate, and Silas, a lonely rancher wrapped in memories, stood on opposite shores of their shared solitude, yearning for comfort in a world that had stripped them of it. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting shadows that danced over the sprawling fields of the ranch. Ilawan stepped off the weathered truck, her heart heavy with uncertainty. A gust of wind swept past, teasing her hair and sending a shiver down her spine. Silas stood a few paces away, his broad shoulders framed by the fading light, a silent sentinel in the midst of the unfolding evening. She clutched the frayed strap of her bag, the weight of it a stark reminder of the journey that had brought her here, a journey marked by loss and the desperate hope of starting anew. Silas turned, his expression unreadable. He studied her with an intensity that made her uneasy. She felt exposed, a flower in a blizzard, yet there was a strange comfort in his presence. The air between them crackled with the unspoken, the silence laden with the weight of two lives intersecting. As their eyes met, a flicker of something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of shared solitude. With a curt nod, he gestured towards the house, and Ilawan followed, footsteps echoing on the hard ground, each one a reminder of her willingness to embrace the unknown. The interior of the ranch house was a study in contrasts, rustic charm mingled with an oppressive stillness. Dust motes floated in the slanting light that pierced through the window panes, illuminating the sparse furnishings. A worn wooden table dominated the space, surrounded by mismatched chairs that spoke of years gone by. The silence enveloped her, thick and heavy like the air before a storm, amplifying every creak and sigh of the house as if it were a living entity. Ilawan took a deep breath, drawing in the faint scent of pine and age, and allowed it to settle in her chest. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of ranch life began to seep into her bones. A routine emerged, the early morning chores, the long days spent tending to the animals, and the quiet evenings filled with nothing but the whisper of the wind against the walls. Each moment felt like a stitch in a tapestry of solitude, the pattern both familiar and foreign. Silas worked alongside her, his presence a constant yet distant shadow. He spoke little, his gruff exterior hiding a depth she could only guess at, but there were moments when their hands brushed together, fleeting, electric, that ignited a spark within her. One evening, after a long day under the baking sun, Ilawan found herself sitting on the porch, the world painted in hues of amber and rose. She watched as Silas moved about the yard, a silhouette against the fading light, and felt a pang of longing ripple through her. He was a mystery wrapped in solitude, and she yearned to unravel the enigma of him. With the cicadas humming softly in the background, she summoned the courage to break the silence. What was she like? The question slipped from her lips, delicate yet demanding an answer. His shoulders tensed, the unyielding armor of grief closing in around him. Silas paused, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. He turned slowly, his gaze piercing as he searched her face, and for the briefest heartbeat, Eloin saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. "She was the light," he finally replied, his voice low and rough, like gravel underfoot. "A fire that warmed everything." The words settled between them, a heavy tapestry woven with grief and memory, and Eloin felt an ache deep within her bones. A longing not just for connection, but for the understanding that they were both haunted by echoes of love lost. Over the weeks, their conversations deepened, peeling back layers of their lives like the bark of an ancient tree. Eloin shared her own story, the loss that had brought her to this desolate place, and in return, Silas spoke of her, the ghost of a woman who haunted his every corner, her laughter still resonating in the quiet spaces of the ranch. Together, they navigated the tender terrain of their shared loneliness, finding solace in the understanding that love's aftermath could bind two fractured souls together, even if it was built on the ashes of what once was. Yet the walls Eloin had built began to crumble, and she felt an unsettling hope blossom against her better judgment. She watched Silas as he tended to the cattle, the muscles in his arms taut and defined under the weight of his labor. It was in these moments that she felt herself drawn closer, an invisible thread pulling her toward him. Still, the shadows of his past loomed large, reminding her that his heart was not easily reclaimed. One afternoon, as they sat under the wide-open sky, Silas turned to her, vulnerability etched into the lines of his weathered face. "I didn't expect you to stay," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Eloin felt her heart race, the air thick with possibility. "Neither did I," she admitted, daring to meet the intensity of his gaze. The truth hung in the air, a delicate balance between hope and fear, as they both wrestled with the tides of their pasts, a testament to the fragile beauty of newfound connection amidst the loneliness that had defined them for too long. The sun stretched its golden fingers across the horizon, spilling light over the desolate expanse of Silas's ranch. Each morning, the air was crisp and chilly, the biting wind mingling with the scent of damp earth. Silas rose before dawn, his silhouette a solitary figure against the vastness of his land. He often spent those early hours tending to the horses, lost in the rhythm of brushing their manes and feeding them hay, the soft sounds of munching breaking the silence. But lately, he found that his thoughts drifted, caught in a whirlpool of questions that had surfaced ever since the crate had washed ashore. Eloin's arrival had turned his world upside down, a storm unsettling the stillness he had grown accustomed to. As she moved about the ranch, he found himself watching her closely, fascinated. She had an uncanny way of lightening the oppressive weight of the air, her laughter echoing against the barn walls. When she helped him with the chores, her presence transformed the mundane into the delightful. They became a seamless duo, Silas's rough hands guiding her delicate ones as they sorted through old tools, the sun casting warm light on their shared moments. Still, there was an undercurrent of discontent that Silas couldn't shake. Eloin's stories of a life he could hardly fathom nagged at him. She spoke of her hometown with a soft nostalgia, a place Silas imagined to be a bustling wonderland. Each time she casually mentioned a left-behind life, a flicker of envy sparked within him. He would catch glimpses of her joy, the way her eyes lit up when she recounted tales of midnight bonfires and laughter-filled gatherings. Silas couldn't help but feel as if he was a mere visitor in her world, and it gnawed at him, a dull ache that contrasted sharply with the blissful facade she wore. Days rolled into weeks, and their routines became a rhythm, Yet Silas felt a growing distance that neither had the courage to address. While Elowen thrived in the open air, embracing the land as if it were her own, Silas withdrew into himself, plagued by insecurities. He found solace in solitude, retreating to the quiet of the fields for hours, the vastness mirroring his own spiraling thoughts. It was during these moments that he often replayed their interactions, searching for the signs of love or companionship, only to be met with the bewildering notion that perhaps he was not enough. There was an evening, the sky ablaze with the fiery hues of twilight, when Silas could no longer contain the tumult within. They sat together on the porch, an old quilt draped over their laps, the crackle of their makeshift fire whispering secrets. Silas's heart raced as he turned to her, a surge of vulnerability overwhelming him. "Elowen," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to you before that crate?" He searched her eyes, watching the shadows dance across her face as the firelight flickered. For a moment, Elowen's expression faltered, the warm glow dimming. Her gaze shifted to the distant horizon, a veil of memories clouding her features. "I left behind so much. Choices, people," she murmured, the weight of her past heavy in the air. Silas felt the tension rise, words caught between them like a bridge unbuilt. As he listened to her, he recognized the tremor in her voice, a reflection of his own uncertainty. The air suddenly felt thick with the things they had not said, the hidden truths lingering just outside their reach. Days turned into nights filled with unshed tears, and Silas's heart ached as he grappled with his emotions. He began to notice the subtle changes in Elowen, her laughter occasionally tinged with sorrow, and her eyes clouded with unspoken fears. The ranch that once felt like a sanctuary now echoed with the weight of their unacknowledged feelings, the joy overshadowed by an invisible barrier. Silas longed to bridge that gap, to pull her close and share the weight of their vulnerabilities. But fear held him back, chaining him to the familiar shadows of solitude. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Silas found Elowen by the river, her silhouette framed by the shimmering waters. She stood there, her hair dancing in the gentle breeze, and for a moment, time stood still. Approaching her slowly, he felt an electric charge between them, the air thick with anticipation. "Elowen," he called out softly, and she turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading light and something deeper. What if we talked about us?" Silas's heart pounded in his chest, the vulnerability of the moment raw and palpable. Elowen looked at him, and for a heartbeat the world faded away. The river rushed beside them, but within this space it was just them. The air was heavy with possibilities, the weight of their shared loneliness now transformed into the potential for something more, yet the fear of the unknown gnawed at both their hearts. Elowen stared at the wooden cabin as the sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across the fading landscape. Silas had retreated inside, the door closing with a soft click that felt more like a prison than protection. She could hear the creak of floorboards as he moved about, restless, brewing his thoughts into something murky and heavy, a brew far more bitter than the coffee he often sipped. She hugged her arms tight around herself, battling an unease that had settled deep in her chest since her arrival. Elowen had fallen so easily into the rhythm of Silas's world. The mornings were filled with the sound of birds accompanying the gentle rustle of wind through the long grass. Talking to him had begun as an adventure, unraveling stories of cattle and storms, dreams lost and found. But now, silence had crept in like a thief, stealing away the warmth they had shared. It felt as if the walls were shifting, pushing them into a chasm of unspoken words and growing misunderstandings. As the light faded, she decided to confront him. The door creaked open, revealing Silas's outline, a silhouette contrasting against the flickering yellow light inside. His face was shadowed, his brow furrowed. Elowen felt her stomach lurch with a mix of hope and fear as she stepped forward, the ground crunching beneath her boots. The air was thick with unspoken tension, and she wondered if he could sense the tremor in her heart. "Silas," she called softly, her voice barely rising above the chorus of cicadas. He turned, but didn't answer, eyes darting elsewhere, perhaps searching for solace in the horizon. That moment hung there, suspended, a brittle thread about to snap. She took another step, brave in her vulnerability. "Please, talk to me." His gaze found hers at last, and she saw a storm brewing within him. "What do you want me to say?" His voice was low, gravelly, as if each word was pulled from a place he'd buried deep. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want you to be here." Each syllable felt like a blade, sharp and deliberate, cutting into the fragile bond they had forged. Elowen recoiled from the accusation, her heart fluttering as she searched his eyes for any trace of the warmth they had shared. "I'm not a burden, Silas. I thought we were finding something together." She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat choking her voice, making it tremble. "You seem so torn, so haunted. I wish I could help you, but you have to let me in." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his features. "It's not just about us, Elowen," he said, the tension in his voice giving way to a moment of vulnerability. "I'm not the man you think I am. I'm still stuck in memories of her, and now you're here, and I don't know how to separate the two." The admission hung in the air, an unvarnished truth that cracked open the shell of silence between them. Elowen could feel her heart ache for him, for the weight he carried like a yoke upon his shoulders. The name hung in the air with a haunting finality, the spectre of a love lost and a life interrupted. "You don't have to forget her," she said quietly, each word chosen with care. "But I can't live in her shadow. I want to help you reclaim who you are now, Silas." His expression softened, the walls around him beginning to crumble. "I don't know how," he murmured, vulnerability spilling into the space between them. "I don't know if I can." In that moment, Elowen saw a man, not a rancher, but a soul yearning for connection, for forgiveness from himself. She stepped closer, daring to breach the distance he had woven around them. "Let me show you," she whispered, her voice trembling. The night enveloped them, their breaths mingling in the coolness, hope blooming in the shared silence. It was a fragile moment, but one that held the power to mend or further fracture. Silas's gaze pierced hers, searching for an answer, a glimpse of what might be if only he dared to take a step forward, to stand against the haunting shadows of his past. Silas stood by the riverbank, the sun casting a golden shimmer over the water, where it rippled as if holding secrets beneath its surface. In the distance, the sprawling fields stretched toward the horizon, the wind whispering through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of earth and memory. He could still feel the warmth of Elowen's laughter resonating in his heart, an echo of something long forgotten. She was a breath of fresh air in his desolate existence, and yet the weight of his world pressed down on him, reminding him of the solitude that molded his days. Elowen watched Silas from the corner of her eye, his rugged hands resting on the rough wood of the old fence. The lines etched into his weathered face spoke of sorrow, but there was something more there, a spark waiting to ignite. She yearned to break through the walls he had built around himself, to bring forth the warmth of connection that twinkled faintly in those deep-set eyes. As he glanced down, she caught a glimpse of the way his fingers trembled, revealing the tumult within his heart, a turmoil she understood all too well. In the quiet moments they shared, something fragile began to unravel between them, a warmth that danced like firelight in the night. Elowen felt the thrum of hope rise within her as she carefully picked a wildflower, its vibrant colors standing out against the muted backdrop of their surroundings. With a gentle smile, she stepped closer to Silas, holding the delicate bloom between them, its petals swaying lightly in the breeze. "For you," she offered, her voice a soft melody that enveloped the air around them. Silas looked down at the wildflower, its beauty contrasting with the ruthless reality of his life. He felt an ache in his chest, a longing deep as the river itself. As he took the flower from her, their fingers brushed, a fleeting moment that ignited an electric connection. His heart raced at the realization of what this simple gesture meant, an unspoken understanding blossoming amidst the pain of their pasts. He raised the wildflower to his nose, inhaling its sweet scent, momentarily forgetting the burden of loss that clung to him like a shadow. In that instant, as he met her gaze, a glimmer of recognition flickered between them, an acknowledgement of wounds that ran deeper than words could express. Iloan saw in Silas's eyes a reflection of her own struggles, the longing for companionship so raw it threatened to spill over. She took a step closer, encroaching upon the invisible barrier he had erected, her heart thundering in her chest. "You know," she said softly, "it's okay to let someone in. You don't have to carry it all alone." The air around them thickened with unspoken words, a deep understanding that neither had dared voice. Silas swallowed hard, his heart filled with a mix of fear and hope. He could almost hear the whispers of the past, the haunting echoes of a love lost, the loss that hung like a heavy shroud around him. Yet, as he looked into Iloan's earnest eyes, he felt the stirrings of something new, something that dared to challenge the darkness within him. "Can I tell you something?" Silas finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Iloan nodded, encouraging him with a gentle smile. "I've been so lost since she left. It feels like a storm raging inside, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever find my way back." He glanced away, the weight of his confession heavy on his shoulders, but when he looked back at her, he found solace in her unwavering gaze. Iloan stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking as if the universe conspired to draw them together. "You're not alone anymore, Silas," she said, her voice steady yet tender. "We can weather this storm together." The sincerity in her words washed over him like the warm sun breaking through a clouded sky. Silas felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a promise that perhaps they could create something beautiful amidst the remains of shattered dreams. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of dusk, Silas reached out, taking Iloan's hand in his. The touch was electric, a connection that transcended the loneliness that had defined his life for so long. In that moment, surrounded by the vastness of the land and the quiet hum of the river, they found something both fragile and powerful, an understanding that even in their scars, they could build a new beginning, hand in hand. Iloan sat by the riverbank, her fingertips grazing the cool surface of the water, which shimmered like shards of glass in the early morning sun. Each ripple whispered secrets she had yet to uncover, but a storm brewed beneath her calm exterior. Silas had offered her a life laced with uncertainty, yet it was also woven with the warmth of possibility. He had held her gaze with such intent, as if he could see the tangled threads of her thoughts and feelings that she herself struggled to unravel. But now, there was a chasm between them, a silence so oppressive that it felt like a constraint on her very soul. Her heart thudded against her chest, a wild drum urging her to bridge that chasm, yet her lips remained sealed. The name that stirred within her was a poison and a balm, a reminder of a life she had never lived but could now almost touch. Each time her mind flitted back to the fleeting memory of the name, his wife's, an invisible barrier snapped tighter around her throat. She wanted to scream, to shout the truth, to free herself from its weight, yet the vulnerability of her confession paralyzed her. Silas stood a few feet away, casting a long shadow across the grass. He was trying to piece together the fragments of her silence, frowning in deep thought. Iloan marveled at the strength that radiated from him, a steadfast rock in an ocean of uncertainty. But he was also an anchor, pulling her deeper into dark waters. She wanted to reach for him, to share the unspoken truths, yet the fear of loss loomed large. What if she could never find her way back from this revelation? What if the truth shattered the fragile bond they had begun to forge? The wind picked up, swirling around her with a gentle insistence, coaxing her to speak. It wrapped around her like a lover's embrace, a reminder that she was not alone. Closing her eyes, Eowyn could almost feel the warmth of a distant sun, illuminating the path before her. 100 unspoken words hovered at the edge of her consciousness, begging for release, yet they remained lodged in her throat like stones, heavy and unyielding. And then a memory flashed. A moment in the night when Silas had wrapped his arms around her, a protective shield against the world. In that instant, confessions had felt like liberation, a breathing space where love could blossom unencumbered. But now, that very love was entwined with shadows, and she drew a sharp breath, uncertain. What if she unleashed chaos with her truth? What if he turned away, horrified by the bond they shared and the name that haunted her? Silas turned to look at her, the sunlight catching the contours of his face, illuminating the quiet vulnerability he masked behind strength. He was searching for answers in her eyes, questions hovering like fireflies in the dusk. The guilt of inaction gnawed at Eowyn, and with it, something began to crack inside her. He deserves to know, a voice within her whispered, urging her to fight against the tide. She opened her mouth, the weight of the river's name on her tongue, but the words faltered in her throat. She could see it now. His hope, his loneliness, and the flicker of something else. Silas embodied resilience, but even he was vulnerable to betrayal. Eowyn's heart twisted, a whirlpool of emotions swirling together, fear, desire, desperation. The silence felt suffocating, yet the river sang softly, reminding her of the life she wished to create. A life where honesty didn't bring ruin, but healing, where truth could unfurl and blossom against the odds. "Silas," she breathed out, her voice trembling like the leaves that danced in the wind. The name was but a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. She felt his eyes lock onto hers, the connection palpable, electric. "Silas, Her voice cracked, but she pushed through, each word a step into the unknown. "I'm not who you think I am." The admission hung in the air, raw and precarious. Silas took a step closer, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding, and then concern. There, in the space between them, Eowyn finally felt the echo of her truth resounding, like the powerful rush of the river behind her. Perhaps this was the moment she had feared, yet in it lay the possibility of salvation. And as the water of the river continued its relentless journey, so too did the tides of her own heart swell, ready to carry her forward, regardless of the cost. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the sprawling fields of Silas's lonely ranch. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers, and the river murmured softly, cradling secrets beneath its surface. Silas stood at the water's edge, the weight of the world pressing heavily on his shoulders. He hadn't expected to find her, a fragile presence amidst the chaos of his life, yet here she was, quietly woven into the tapestry of his days. Eowyn, with her haunting eyes and gentle heart, had become a light in his darkness. Eowyn sat beside him, her fingertips trailing through the cool water as she watched the ripples dance away. Though they had shared stories and laughter, silence enveloped them like a thick fog. She could sense the turmoil in him, the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Silas, a man weathered by grief and solitude, struggled to reconcile the fragments of his past with the unexpected hope that Eowyn had ignited within him. She was a puzzle piece he never knew he was missing, yet the shadows of memory loomed large and forbidding, casting doubt on what could blossom between them. "Sometimes," Eowyn began, her voice barely above a whisper, "the things we want most are the hardest to accept." She turned her gaze to him, searching for understanding in his deep-set eyes. Silas looked away, focusing on the water, unwilling to let her see the crack in his armor. He felt her presence like a tether, pulling him back from the precipice of despair, but the name that lingered on his lips was a ghost he couldn't shake, a name that echoed the heartache of his lost love. "I wish I could reach through the fog," Elowen continued, her courage growing with each word, "to bring you back to the light." Silas clenched his jaw, the memory of his wife's laughter haunting him like a melody he couldn't escape. He could still see her, the way she would twirl in the golden light, her hair a flowing cascade of dreams. But that light had been extinguished, and he was left to wander in the dark, unsure if he deserved the warmth Elowen offered. "Why do you care?" he finally asked, his voice tinged with bitterness, yet laced with vulnerability. "I'm broken, Elowen. I'm not the man I was. Not anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with his admission. Elowen's heart ached as she listened, feeling the rawness of his pain seeping into her own spirit. She had longed to heal him, to show him the beauty of second chances, but how could she break through the iron walls he had built around his heart? "Because," she whispered, drawing closer, "I see the man you can be. I see the love still flickering within you, Silas." His name fell from her lips like a prayer, and as he turned to meet her gaze, the warmth of recognition enveloped him. It was as if she could glimpse the flicker of hope beneath the layers of grief and loneliness. He searched her eyes, trying to find the truth in her words, afraid to allow himself the luxury of believing. With trembling hands, Elowen reached for his, her fingers brushing against the roughness of his calloused palm. "I can't promise to erase the past, but I can help you create a new future. Just let me in." Silas felt a tremor ripple through him, the walls he had constructed beginning to crack. He studied her face, the sincerity etched into her features, and in that moment he saw not just Elowen, but the reflection of everything he had lost and everything he still had the potential to gain. The river flowed relentlessly beside them, a testament to the passage of time and the inevitability of change. "Elowen," he whispered, trying her name on his tongue for the first time. It tasted sweet, like the promise of spring after a long winter. The name he had whispered countless times in the dark now felt like a beacon of hope. And then, suddenly, the dam broke. The flood of emotion he had held back surged forth, and he reached for her, pulling her into an embrace that seemed to hold the weight of their shared pain and burgeoning love. In that moment, as they stood by the river, Silas felt the first flicker of light pierce the shadows of his heart. Elowen whispered softly, "I'm here, Silas. You're not alone." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, coloring the sky with shades of hope, Silas finally understood. Sometimes it takes a chance encounter, a whisper of love, to light the way home. Elowen stood at the water's edge, the fading light casting golden ripples upon the surface. Silas, worn and weathered, took a hesitant step forward, the earth whispering beneath his heavy boots. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the distant rustle of leaves, a chorus of nature cradling the weight of unwept sorrow. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the twilight's hues, a mirror of understanding forged in shared silence. With delicate fingers, she reached for a stray wildflower, the vibrant blue echoing the sky above. Elowen knelt, placing it gently at the foot of the old willow, a silent tribute to the lost and the loved. Silas, drawn by an unseen force, knelt beside her, their shoulders brushing, a bridge spanning the chasms of grief. He felt the warmth of her presence, a promise woven through the fabric of their solitude. In that moment, they were neither strangers nor forsaken hearts, but vessels of whispered memories stitched together by fate. As a gentle breeze rustled the willow's branches, he reached out, their hands intertwining. A simple gesture, yet profound, binding past to present. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat in the embrace of dusk, silence wrapping around them like a soft shawl, a new beginning cradled in the echo of their stillness.